If you're trying to track vocals and they keep sounding like absolute trash, I'm gonna explain to you a very simple and effective method for tracking and mixing vocals that's gonna work every single time, and it's gonna leave you with great sounding vocals with minimal effort. All right, so we are here in Ableton 12. Doesn't matter what version you have as long as you have the suite, because the plugins are going to be the same. They're all stock Ableton plugins that have been around a long time. And so before we get into the processing of this audio sample, I'm going to kind of explain to you what we're looking for and what we want to do before we even get to this point. So in order to efficiently process a vocal, we need to have a healthy signal. And what I mean by that is, see here we have like our transients, we have the vocal, you know, the waves. They're a healthy signal, meaning that they're not super quiet and they're also not super loud. We have like one crazy peak here, but a lot of people, including myself, make the mistake of when you're tracking your vocals, recording them like this. And there's a lot of problems with doing this. First one is that the noise floor is not far enough from the vocals. And basically what that means is you're not going to be able to remove the noise, like the room tone. And then it's just, if we wanted to make this loud, we're going to have to crank up the gain, which is going to introduce noise. So we don't want to do this. Starting at like here is fine. I like to get it as loud as I can without clipping. So somewhere around here, we have this crazy peak here, but like somewhere around here or like here would be a good like healthy start. So it's loud, but it's not clipping. So before we even like start processing, we want to like realize where we want our vocals to sit. And if we look at like the meter here, can count the years on one hand. We're about in the yellow. So we're a little past the green, but we're not hitting the red. And that's something you want to watch out for, because that's going to have a huge effect on your ability to clean up the vocal. Next thing I want to talk about is the room tone and how we can kind of mitigate that and avoid that at all costs. So basically what we have here is like this little waveform here we can see is basically what's called room tone. So it's pretty like quiet and it's pretty hard to notice, but basically what it does is it creates noise in your vocal, and it's caused by, it can be a fan, it can be an AC unit, it can be a refrigerator. All kinds of things can cause that little tone, you know, in your vocals that your microphone picks up. I have a light going on here. So I have like a light that's just a little bit loud. So I'll probably have a little room tone in this recording. But that's why we want to make sure that our vocal is recorded loud, because now this is going to make it easy for us to remove this. One thing I highly recommend is a vocal isolator. So they basically look like afros. They've been out for a couple of years, and what they are is a piece of foam that goes over your microphone, and they actually work super good. There's a lot of people who hate on them, but they work absolutely phenomenal. Every vocal I've ever done has not been in a studio. It's just been with the isolator. They range from like $30 on Amazon to the expensive Chaotica one is like $200. That one's fire. You literally have people like Snoop Dogg and some of the biggest artists in the world using that one. Had there been a isolator on here, this would have been less or maybe none at all. So those are a couple things to take into consideration before you even get to this point. So with that being said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this room noise. We're going to use a tool called a gate. So Ableton stock gate, Command F, search for gate. And what this does is it only lets volume in past a certain level. So for instance, we can have it so it's not letting this in, but once it gets to a certain level here or here, it's going to let the sound play. So I'll show you what I mean here. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better. So notice right here, I'll zoom in. When it's playing over here on like this part, like the room tone, it's not letting it in. So like if we zoom in here on our gate, what's happening is it's saying, okay, it needs to be negative 36 dB at least to be audible. If we decrease this, now it's going to let the room tone in. So we want that just to where it's catching all the room tone, but it's not affecting the vocals. Sometimes this isn't perfect. That's why it's important to get as less room tone in as possible. But this is pretty good for this example. So the room tone's not coming in and the vocals are not being chopped out. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better. So that's the first part into creating our vocals and making them clean. We want to always put on a gate and then we're going to compress. So don't ever compress first, because basically what compression does is it's going to decrease the dynamic range. So it's going to turn these peaks down at the same time all this stuff is going to be turned up. So we typically want to do volume automation and gating before we compress. So for example, what I would probably do is before I even get in there and start compressing, I'm going to come in here and automate a utility to turn down just this peak here. The reason we do this is because the more of the dynamic range, so the bigger of a difference between the loudest and the quietest point, is going to cause us to compress more, which means it's going to cause us to turn everything up more. So if we have any like super rogue peaks like this, it's good to address them before we start compressing. So this is the only one that's a major problem, so let's kind of see how that sounds if it's more level now. Better. Good, so we got that rogue peak out of there. It's tamed, it's not clipping. So now we're going to introduce some compression. So if you're unfamiliar what compression is, it's basically volume automation. So it's essentially what we just did, except it's being triggered by the volume level and we're decreasing it by a certain ratio we're setting. So I'll just show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to grab an Ableton stock compressor. It's just called compressor. Better. So the threshold is when we tell the sound to turn down. So this is kind of like a corny metaphor that I learned in school, but basically the compressor is like you're upstairs in your room listening to music and your mother tells you to turn it down. The threshold is the amount at which she tells you to turn it down. So like say you're like turn it up, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I'm going to tell him to turn that down. That's what the threshold is. When it reaches a certain point of loudness, it's saying, hey, turn this back down. The ratio is how much you turn down the radio in relationship to how much she asks you to turn it down. So if it's a infinity to 1 ratio, if she's saying turn that down by 3, you're turning it all the way down by 3. If she says turn it down by 3 and you turn it down by 1, then that would be a 3 to 1 ratio. Better. The reason we're doing this is because we don't like an infinity to 1 ratio is essentially a limiter. Better. So it's completely turning everything down that comes in. We want it more natural and we don't want it to be as aggressive. So we're going to do a 3 to 1, 4 to 1 ratio is a good starting point. And we're going to set the threshold so it's just catching the peaks here. So we're just seeing a little bit of gain reduction. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better. It's not a walk in the park. So as far as attack and release goes, attack is how fast it turns down after it comes in. We typically want this pretty quick, not super fast because then you're going to have problems, but like I usually leave around 0.07. And then release you can set to automatic. That's just how quickly the compressor turns off. So you don't have to be like crazy analytical here. You can be, but this is good enough. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other. And if you're not getting the effects you want, you can always go a little bit more aggressive with the ratio, the threshold, or you can actually even just duplicate this. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. And remember, what we're doing when we're compressing is we're actually turning everything down. So what we're going to want to do is after we turn everything down and automate these volumes down, we want to bring back the volume levels. So compression doesn't actually make things louder as some people portray it. You're actually turning the peaks down so you can turn everything louder. So now you don't have everything's consistent and louder. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold. So we're going to crank the output decibel just a little bit. I never press makeup gain because it just way overshoots the mark. Can count the years on one hand. Like we do not want it that loud, so we'll just crank this out like, let's say like 3.38 dB, something like there. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold. So now we have the noise removed and we have a consistent dynamic range. And I'll show you what I mean by dynamic range. So what we're going to do is we're going to freeze and flatten this audio clip just for this example so you can see what's actually happening with the waveform. So we're going to freeze this and flatten. So we're basically printing these effects to audio. And you'll notice now everything's a lot more even. There's a couple peaks in here, but everything's louder. The quiet peaks are louder and the louder peaks are quieter. So we have a more consistent volume range. So it's this versus this. So you can kind of see, you know, what the compression is doing. We'll just keep it printed. That's fine. Freeze, flatten. So the next thing we're going to want to do is going to attenuate some frequencies. So I'm going to explain to you what frequencies we're typically going to deal with. They're usually the same ones and how we're going to fix them. So we're going to grab an EQ8, Command F, EQ8, stock Ableton EQ. The first thing we're always going to want to do with vocals, no matter the vocal, is we're going to high pass it. So down here, these frequencies, zoom in a little bit here. These, anything really below 130, we just don't need in pretty much anything except our sub bass. So even like synths, instruments, you could go a little further sometimes, around 100, around 90, but like typically the only thing we want sitting here is our sub bass. So for starters on a vocal, I'm going to put this at 130. And you'll notice there's not really much, it's not taking anything away from the vocal.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
This is literally just low-end sound we don't want. There's not a lot of it, we just don't want it. The next section we're going to look at is the mud section. So when you hear like boominess, like and it's really aggressive, that's going to be the 250 hertz range. So I'm going to solo this and play it so you can hear what I'm talking about.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better.
So I'm trying to kind of emulate a sound that's a common problem. It's not so much an issue here. It can be described as like boominess or boxiness. So when you have that like really...
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
This sound usually needs to be attenuated a little bit. So what some people will do is come in here and just cut this up to 250 because we want to cut the lows out and we also want to attenuate the boominess range. But you'll notice if we do that, now the vocal's thinned out. So what I mean by thinned out is we've removed too many lows.
Can count the years in together.
That's what a thin vocal sounds like. So we just removed more than we wanted to. So the move here is we're going to put this at about 130K. And then if we have to, we're going to slightly attenuate just the mud section. And remember, we want to think surgical when we're EQing. Typically, we don't want to make huge dramatic changes. Like we just want little attenuations.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold.
Great, that's sounding good already.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
So the next thing we're going to look at is this range. So sibilance range is really between like 7 to 10K. And the sibilance range is like the tss, like the S's and the T's and the harshness almost. And this typically is a problem with vocals because of the S's and the T's, and it usually needs to be addressed. So I'm going to kind of outline this sound and what we're looking for here. So we're going to hit a bell so we can kind of accentuate it.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better.
So that those like harsh T's, that sound that almost hurts your ears. Like if it's too loud in a song, it kind of like hurts your ears. That's what we're looking for. We could attenuate it with this. So we could come in here and do a little dip. This is not an Ableton plugin. There are some free ones out there, but an absolutely terrific way to mitigate this is a de-esser. So it's exactly what it sounds like. It kind of takes away the harshness and removes some of the sibilance and the essing. The best one on the market that I've used is Pro DS. Fab Filter is absolutely phenomenal. This is a great plugin.
Can count.
And what it actually is it's a compressor that's focusing on a very specific range, so just the harshness range. So we can hear the difference of what it's cutting out.
We've been together. I need the other one to hold you.
This would be ideal if we had a de-esser. I will link a free one in the description. They're all pretty good. This one's the best. It's, you know, it's not kind of on the pricey side, but we could use a de-esser. The other way we can kind of mitigate this is with multi-band compression. So we're going to come up here and grab a multi-band dynamics. And then all we would have to do is figure out where our sibilance range is. So 7 to 10K, somewhere around there. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to set this to So this is capturing some stuff that's a little bit above that, but that's really fine. If we wanted to go this route, we would set this at about where the sibilance starts. And then what we would do is we would come in here and basically what a multi-band dynamics is it's multiple compressors. So just like we saw with the compressors, it's volume automation, but now it gives us the flexibility to automate volume just in specific frequencies. So like just right here, or just right here in the lows, or just right here in the highs. So we're basically emulating a de-esser in doing this.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
So again, we're just compressing a little bit of that harshness and sibilance range if we need to. So these are really the main problems that you're going to run into. One thing I really like to do that makes the vocal sound 1,000 times better most of the time is boosting some of the air in the vocals. So we've talked about some of these, the lower frequencies, the mud, the sibilance. Another frequency range we have is the air. So the air is going to be like the very, very top. So we're going to grab an EQ8 and literally come over here and we're going to like crank just the very high end of this.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you.
So pretty much right where the sibilance ends is it's just like air. It's the best way I can describe it. It's typically how it's described. This is gonna like bring the vocal to life, like give it some more body, because with mics, basically with like cheaper mics and even mics that aren't like super high end, the two places they're going to lack is like the sub bass frequency, which we don't really need, and then like the top end frequency. That's why like if we did something like this and put a low pass, which is cutting out the highs, and we put a high pass, this is going to sound like a telephone or like a bad cell phone or something like this.
Can count the years that we've been together. I need the other one to hold. Make you feel better.
So the cheaper, audio stuff is, the less it's capable of generating the low end, carrying the low end and the high end. So that's why like this kind of sounds like a telephone or like a bad Android phone or something like that. So what we're going to do, like I was saying, is we're going to boost the highs. So we're going to boost just up here. So it kind of gives a little air and life back to the vocal.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better.
Cool. So so far we're doing pretty good. We can really only do so much with this vocal. It was recorded either on not the best mic or perhaps even on a phone. Coming from where we started, like this is great. We removed all the noise. We have an even inconsistent dynamic range. We EQ'd out the frequencies we don't want. What I would do from here is I would do a little bit of spatial effects. So this is a quick OG tip that I'm going to give to you guys that pretty much is instantly going to make your vocals bang and sound good, and that's chains and parallel compression. Parallel compression and parallel reverb and delay. If you didn't understand anything I just said, I'm going to kind of break it down as easily as possible. So when you're parallel processing something, you're basically splitting the signal. So if we come over here and we have like our return tracks down here, what we're doing is we're sending some of the signal of this audio clip into a different track that has reverb on it.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
So what we're actually hearing is like, this is different than if we just put reverb on this track here. So if we came in here and put a reverb directly on the track, now the entire vocal is completely wet. And what that does is it pushes it back, and we typically want our vocal up front. What parallel does is we're maintaining our dry signal, and we're also having our wet signal. So we have two different signals that are meeting on the master.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
And the reason this kind of applies to chains is because chains is basically emulating this process. So we're going to split the signal so we can process it in two different ways. So we're going to grab a convolution reverb. These are free on the Ableton website. Convolution reverb basically emulates spaces of reverb. It's pretty unique. And we can like find a space that we kind of want to emulate. So we can do like halls, chambers in large rooms. Maybe we want to do like a deep chamber or like an East church.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
Yeah, so that one's pretty cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the reverb and we're going to Command J, or we're going to right click and select group. I'm sorry, Command G. And now we're going to come over here and we're going to hit this little tab right here, and this is going to show us our first chain, which is the reverb. Now we're going to right click and create a chain, and now what's happening is the vocals are coming in here and it's splitting off into two chains. We have a vocal signal here and we have one coming out here. So we have one that's dry with no effects on it, and then we have the reverb. So this is essentially the same as the bus, only now we have more flexibility because we can put reverbs that are particular to certain tracks or sounds, and we can do numerous ones any way we want. It's pretty cool. So typically with parallel processing, what we want to do is crank up the dry wet over here all the way, and then we're going to increase the amount of the signal. Pretty much start like low at like negative 24 dB and see how we like that.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you.
So another really cool OG trick I'm going to give you guys is sidechaining the reverb to itself. So what we're basically going to do here is we're going to come in here and we're going to tell the compressor to kick on and to duck the reverb when the vocal is playing. So what that means is the reverb is only going to play when it's out of the way of the vocal, which is really cool because we can have our dry vocal, and then once the vocal is done playing, the reverb is going to come in. So we're going to click this arrow here, sidechain from, and we're going to sidechain from the track we're actually working on. And then we're going to decrease the threshold.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
So notice how now the reverb is not playing when the vocal is playing. And that's cool because now we have like the presence of the vocal, and then we have the parallel reverb that's coming in once it's done to fill the space.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better.
So we can actually do as many chains as we want. So we can actually come in here, create a chain, and let's do like a delay. Let's do like a Ableton stock delay and give it like a little bit of that echo kind of feel. So we'll grab a delay and we're going to now toss this on this chain on top of the chain, and we'll do like 4 all the way wet, maybe a little ping pong, maybe we'll just do like the lows, and then we'll again put this at like negative 24 to start.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other.
Maybe we'll try like the top end, and maybe we'll also compress the delay so it's also turning down when the vocals are playing.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better. It's not a walk in the park to love each other.
So that's sounding pretty good, honestly. I'm really liking the way this is sounding. Maybe we'll back up a little bit on the delay, kind of play with these spatial effects. But overall, like this would be where I would start personally if I was processing a vocal. All these effects are kind of, a different deal, but as far as processing the vocals, to kind of reiterate, the gate, the compression, the EQ, a little bit of multi-band dynamics, so kind of like evening everything out, a little air boost, and then some parallel spatial effects. I can't stress that enough that we want these to be parallel, because if they're directly on the track, it's going to push everything back. That's one big mistake I see a lot of new producers make, is they put the reverb right on the track, and now the reverb, their vocal, is sitting like towards the back of the mix. So
can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
And like really experiment with chains and what you can do. Like another thing I like to do is a saturation chain. We have like the reverb, the delay, and then we have a saturated signal that's like right in the front.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better.
We can also pan these effects, so like maybe we want the saturation a little to the right, maybe we want the delay on the left, maybe we want the reverb to the right. Now what we've done is we have 4 different signals, all with different processing, and we have this big powerful vocal. So we went from like this.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together.
To this.
Can count the years on one hand that we've been together. I need the other one to hold you, make you feel better.
So now it's got all this dimension and this life and this body to it. And that's really what we're trying to do with our vocals, is we don't want them thin, we don't want them boring. We want spatial effects, we want the EQing, the saturation, and all that. So I really hope this was helpful to you guys. I hope this was a good starting point in kind of getting your vocal to start sounding good. Remember, the main thing is the healthy signal, removing the noise, and then, getting everything dynamically close to each other. And then these spatial effects kind of to your taste and kind of to the vibe of the track. Toss me a subscribe and a like if you liked the video and it was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.
Mark.